Hello and welcome to Games That I Worked On, Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. Um, Hopefully I'm going to be able to keep my commentary a little bit more consistent, a little more interesting than I did for games that I worked on Red Faction Guerrilla. But 9 Space Marine is Space Marine. I'm going to sit and chat on the title screen for a little bit, because Space Marine had a really kind of an interesting development history, and wasn't much publicized, but Space Marine, it started out, it was the original pitch and game prototype came from THQ's Australian studio, or THQ Studio Australia, or Studio Oz, it was frequently referred to, and I think they greenlit development from Studio Oz for a little bit, but their version of the game was not very good at all. There was a leak of the pitch video for it that they did that had like their prototype build and gameplay on that, and it wasn't that great. And there are people that say, I've seen comments online or something, that if Studio Oz had been allowed to keep and finish the game, it would have been way better than the version of the game that we got, and that's not true, not even a little bit. It was a really bad game. And I kind of hate saying that, because I love the Studio Oz guys, and the Avengers game that they were making was fantastic. But Space Marine, as they were making it, was not good. And so at some point, and it might have been, this is speculation on my part, it might have been at Games Workshop's insistence, or it might have just been from internal, but the decision was made that since Relic already had the existing and strong working relationship with Games Workshop from Dawn of War and Dawn of War 2, and clearly had a really good handle on the whole Warhammer 40,000 IP, the decision was made to switch Space Marine and take it away from Studio Oz and give it to Relic. And so it was like about a year after the E3, after that initial Studio Oz pitch video leaked, and I'm actually going to link some to that video in the description, so you can go watch that and draw your own conclusions. But I think it was the E3 after that leaked, the announcement trailer of the Relic version was released, and the initial announcement and a lot of initial design work for the Relic version of the game was very, very different than the game that we got in the end. It was a little bit more of an RPG. It was more squad focused. It was sort of like Dawn of War 2, but as a third-person actioner instead of as a squad-level RTS. And they had a lot of really cool ideas that they were going to do for it that I was really hoping we were going to see in Space Marine 2, because there was basically, you were going to have a squad, and they showed a little bit of this in that initial announcement trailer. And it was like you would have a squad, and there would be squad customization. You would take the squad on different missions. You would have the four main classes. If you had the regular Space Marine, you had the assault, you had the heavy, and you had the librarian. And there were a lot of really cool things that they were doing with the gameplay for that. Like the librarian had this mechanic where Space Marine librarians are really powerful psychers. So he had all these psychic attacks, and in order to use them, he had to charge up his psychic energies. And so when they were low, in order to recharge them, he had to open himself up to the warp to absorb more energies. And you could do this thing where while you were open to the warp, you could use the psychic attacks at the same time, and they would be massively more powerful. But there was a huge risk in that, because if you did that, there was a chance that tears into the warp would open and demons would come spilling out, and it just sounded really cool. But they never really implemented that setup. So I think it was about maybe a year, 6 months to a year into development on that version, the decision was made to take it back and turn it into more of a straightforward linear actioner, story-driven actioner. And then that was, I don't know if that when I went up to Relic for the kickoff meeting for the game before it entered QA, it sounded like that was a decision that was driven internally by Relic, but it might have come from someone else in production on THQ side. I'm not really sure, and I don't really want to speculate on that because there were other decisions that THQ made that messed up the game a little bit more. So, with that said, with the brief history of the development of Space Marine given, let's just go into the campaign. I'm gonna talk about stuff. The engine used was the Darksiders engine, which was Vigil's engine, but ironically, almost, Relic got a lot more out of that engine than Vigil did on either Darksiders or Darksiders 2, in my opinion. You can just see like the depth of field effects in this are just way cooler. Really good. It's like, well, obviously I'm playing on PC, so the resolution is way better, but even on consoles, they got a better native resolution out of it than Vigil did with Darksiders. So, but I'm going to jump into the campaign and do some commentating on the campaign. I'm going to do it on hard because I always do it on hard because it's a game that I worked on. Hard shouldn't be too hard for me, even though sometimes it is because I'm trying to talk and play at the same time. Previous campaign data, save data, yes I do want to continue. Okay. So, one of the first things I want to mention a little bit about is this whole opening cutscene. That when they first started to implement it, this part was kind of obviously sort of placeholdery, like these sort of motion graphics and talking about the orc wall and stuff. Or a little bit placeholder, but when you get into once this sort of situation report thing happens and it transitions, I gotta stop talking for a little bit because I need to wait for the transition to happen. But yeah, when I transitioned to here, when they had the early versions of this cutscene, it was the sort of hand-painted sort of style of the debris and stuff, and it looked very much like the old Homeworld cutscenes, and I thought that was really cool because I thought it was a nice callback to Relic's history, and I was hoping that they were going to keep it that way, and then they switched it. They finally outsourced it to probably Blur to do this part, and rendered it. And I was a little sad about that because I liked just the feel of the sort of painted animatic sort of thing they had. So Captain Titus, who is voiced by Mark Strong.
Captain Titus, the orcs have massacred the Forge World's forces.
And
they have taken
I think the story that we got told when we went up to Relic, because it was me and another acute lead, and me and a couple other leads, and the story that we got told when we went up to Relic, the thing was that Games Workshop has to sign off on absolutely everything related to their IP when you're developing a game based on it. And so voice acting, they had to sign off on the voice actors stuff, and they were initially apparently a little not on board with Mark Strong as the voice of Captain Titus, But then when they got like the first like voice tests of Mark Strong just reading the dialogue, they realized, they were like, oh my god, he is perfect. And that, after that they kind of considered Mark Strong as basically, the voice of Mark Strong is the sort of, now for them, the prototype of how a Space Marine should sound, because he does have this sort of quiet confidence and sort of, I don't know really. Okay, this falling sequence, right? In this first builds we got, this was actually a playable thing. It didn't work very well, so they didn't have any collision in for any of the debris, but you were and you controlled Captain Titus as he fell through all the ships getting blown up and stuff, and landed on the Orc kill cruiser here. It was like that for a few months, and then they eventually, and correctly, in my opinion, decided to cut that, because A, it didn't play very well, and B, basically everything was doing that at that point. Every game was doing this sort of playable falling sequencing. Dead Space 2 had just done it. Saints Row 3 had just done it. And so they finally cut it. And then, so then there's, you got it. They changed it into the non-interactive cutscene, and then it, became what it was. And then for a while, you also started out with the chainsword, and then for reasons that I still don't really understand, they changed their mind on that. So then, we land on the kill cruiser and do this fight on the kill cruiser. And the other thing about the kill cruiser is there was a Xbox Live Arcade and PSN exclusive downloadable title called Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team that was a tie-in for this, and it was it took place actually within this kill cruiser as it was on its way to Gaia, and it was a kind of a third-person isometric top-down twin-stick shooter sort of thing, where you play, and they used some of the stuff from some of the early design stuff, like the classes that you could play in, and that, and it was a really fun game, and was, up until I was let go from THQ, and according to the stats that I had, was the best-selling Xbox Live Arcade title that THQ had ever done, and which made the fact that they closed the studio that made it like right after it came out was really kind of stupid on their part. But yeah, but that one, this whole story was that you were a Space Marine kill team that just like went into this kill cruiser and just totally wreaked havoc and did a whole bunch of damage to it, which is why it is so easy. It sort of explains how Titus was able to take it down as easily as he does just by doing this sequence here. So I'm gonna finish this sequence. Ooh, boom. One of the other things early on, the decision to, the whole health recharge sequence of having to like stun a guy and then do a sync kill on him was a fairly late addition. It was kind of a midway addition in the game, and it did just have regular regenerating health. And when they added that, they didn't really tell us that they were doing that, and we kind of all thought that it was a bug that health wasn't recharging anymore. So I mean, this is pretty classic communication issues in game between game QA and development, just in general. But for the most part, Relic was really good. I mean, Relic was one of my favorite developers to work with because months before we ever saw a build of the game, they sent us an email. They sent my team an email asking if we had any documentation for how they should do their menu systems and how they should do just a lot of their UI to make it so that make it compliant. Because I was on the compliance team for Microsoft, and they basically we sent them that, and they implemented all of it before the game even came into test. So there was a pretty long period where I didn't even really have to do much because everything was right there, was already working. Oh shit! I ended up. Oh goddamn! I keep forgetting what buttons I'm supposed to use. Back. Okay. The game got a lot of criticism for using the Ultramarines because they're kind of the most boring of the Space Marine chapters. Ah, goddamn. Fucking war boss. But I'm decision to use the Ultramarines is basically because the Ultramarines are just, you know, the sort of the template of Space Marines. And that's why they use them. And come on, how badass is this? Just surfs down on the thing after wrecking it. Gets up and it's fine because he's a Space Marine captain and he is. That was another kind of late addition there. The actually throwing the title up right there, but it's pretty badass.
Damned orcs shot me off course. I've had no word from Leandros, but I'm picking up box chatter from Imperial Guard forces on the ground.
I scarcely thought anyone would be left alive. Much less still fighting.
Heading towards the front lines now.
I will meet you there.
There were some other things in like the early stuff. Like there was let's see, I don't even know where it is. There'll be a point coming up really early on, like even before we got stuff like like right here. They did some, like they were kind of trying to follow the Gears of War template a lot. So there would have been early on there would have been a hotkey to jump down instead of just being able to walk off the ledge, and we like pretty universally are like, that's just dumb, just let us walk off the ledge. And Relic being understanding that that is better design, fixed that, thank God. I use this stuff. I don't know how much of the in-game sound I'm getting here. Yeah, like the voice of Graya that you hear at certain points, and sort of the black humor of that. Oh, man. I guess since I would have had to have completely deleted my save games in order to do it, because there are these sort of servo skulls that are scattered around. You pick them up and they just have like messages, and there are these kind of a bunch of different little stories of what was going on in this war on this planet. But I guess since I picked them up in my other playthrough, I can't pick any of them up and discuss them, because they're cool because they give you a lot of background on some other, and they give you a background of like just what the people on Grai are like, but there's also a lot of background about an Inquisitor coming up. Comes up much later in the game.
Access authorized. The Emperor be with you, Space Marine.
Bolter.
This way, boys.
Relic being a primarily PC-focused developer, they got the PC version pretty right on this, which is a lot of people have a lot of when doing multi-platforms. PC doesn't get the love that it deserves always. But Relic did right by the PC community with this, as much as they could, and within their constraints that they had, because obviously they didn't give us an editor or anything. But
Captain! Destroy them!
so there was another thing, and it sort of changed. It was kind of a minor thing, but it was one that I was always a little sad about that it changed. Was that when the game first came to test, there was a little bit more as far as being able to, you could actually like do some targeting of enemies, to like, you could blow off like the legs off of an orc if you just shot it, if you concentrated your fire onto the legs, and they would crawl along the ground. Like trying to kill you until you blew their heads off. But I think they decided that they wanted to get a lot more orcs on the screen than they could get generally, and I think that doing that sort of dismemberment made the hitbox so complex. I thought I had some grenades. But yeah, I think it just made the hitbox too complicated, so they couldn't get enough guys on screen. They had to cut it and simplify it so they could get more. Yeah, see, like that. That was something that you could do in-game instead of as a scripted thing.
Are you wounded? The Codex has started its warns against using jump packs to leap blindly into enemy fire, and for good reason.
Your days as a novice are behind you. Why do you still interpret the Codex so narrow?
I looked at its rules for guidance.
We all do. But there are also benefits to thinking for yourself.
Yeah. This whole thing of Titus is kind of unique amongst Ultramarines in that he is not super by the book. Because, I mean, the Ultramarines are supposed to be the most by the book. like Leandros. I mean, Leandros is a super by-the-book Ultramarine, and it was... The Codex Astartes was written by the guy who... I can't remember his name, but the first Ultramarine, son of the Emperor, who was the guy who was provided the gene seed for the Ultramarines as a whole, as an entire chapter, and really the first Space Marine. No, I guess no, I'm getting my history wrong there. It was because he wrote it after Codex Astartes was written after the Horus Heresy, and it was designed, you know, to make sure that the Space Marines wouldn't become so powerful that they would be able to challenge the Emperor again, but also provide strategy and a bunch of other things. Yeah. Keep a look at that statue. Boom. Oh.
Sedona's
Like
picked
I
up
said,
local Imperial Guard communications.
earlier than I remember.
They survived under the shadow of that gun. I won't know how.